Hello everyone, P. McGee here. Unlike most of my videos in which I dissect and analyze my gameplay in various draft matches, I am mixing up the format today and taking a look at a recent draft I completed in a National Dex League called the Purple Society. The reason for this video is that I really wanted to give some clarity on my draft approach and how I generally am aiming to collect pieces and assemble a team and where I am looking to synergize and what I am generally trying to establish as my reliable win conditions or just overall good pieces in a week to week sense to give a sense, or at least to give some clarity on what might otherwise be considered some peculiar choices for a draft team. I approached this one with the goal of utilizing several mons that I normally avoid at all costs, as they don't usually synergize with my playstyle, or they historically have not been good mons in most draft leagues. Although I think and I'm hoping to prove by the end of this season that most of that is attributed to inexperienced coaches drafting them or them being put on teams that they do not synergize well with. And I'll break that down as we kind of get to those mons. But there are a few of them on this team, and I think there are criticisms to be had for those mons. I think the team assembled here is built to address those criticisms as best as possible. And so I'm hoping by the end of this video that whether or not you like some of those mons, and I think the most obvious and glaring example here is the Galarian Darmanitan. Whether you like them or not, I hope by the end you can kind of see where I am trying to synergize that on my team and how it ultimately could be a good piece on here. It's hard to say until the season actually gets going. I've had teams before that I thought were really, really good. They only did average, and I've had teams I didn't like that have won draft leagues. So it's impossible to tell the quality of a team until you really get into the season and you really start building week to week and you see how pieces synergize. But on paper, the team I have here, I think, is really well built to maximize some of the more peculiar mons, as well as give traditional effective pieces the opportunity to shine on a squad like this. So we're going to dive into this a little bit, kind of break down from the very beginning what I was going for with my very first pick, who is Mew, we'll get to in a second, and how I used each successive piece to establish a certain role on the team and try to fill certain gaps so that by the time I get to Swirlix, it's understood what I was going for through each pick and how I think ultimately it's going to synergize as a complete unit and ideally be very effective in this National Dex League. So, diving right into it, the Mew is one of the few top tier mons I had not used before. Obviously, it's a good mon. It has a uh, very high skill cap where a player really needs to know what they're doing with it on a week to week basis in order to get the most out of Mew. A 3 attack Dragon Dance Mew can work, but if you're running that every week, you're really misusing Mew because Mew can do literally everything. And the same goes for running Toxic Spikes, stacking or hazard stacking Mew every week as well. Yes, it works. Yes, there are situations where that's a really good set and probably the best set from you to run, but you don't want to be pigeonholed into a certain set with Mew every week. So you want to, when you're assembling a Mew team, it's my opinion that you want to keep Mew as versatile as possible. So it's really important to pick up good hazard control. It's really important to pick up good sweepers, and it's really important to pick up several mixed attacker options because that lets Mew have all the needed versatility it's ever going to need, where those other mons can slot in and take those spots for that certain type of matchup week after week. And that way Mew can be whatever Mew needs to be for that match. There may be weeks where I want Mew to be really offensive, but I still have other traditionally offensive pieces I can run as well, or Mew can slot in for that week instead of that Mon so that Mew can do that role. But the goal here is to give Mew the flexibility to be whatever I need it to be in any particular matchup. So I essentially have to, with my other remaining 10 picks, pick up Mons that are going to more or less create a full squad. And then that way I can have this Mew on this team and Mew can be whatever I want it to be. So that's my general approach going into this is I have Mew, but essentially I've not drafted anything yet. So I'm going to more or less restart the draft, excluding Mew for now, and then build the rest of the team. And ideally the rest of the team is more or less complete and Mew can generally function as whatever I need it to. So that's why I slide into Corviknight on my second pick. Corviknight's a really strong mon in the draft format, especially on the right teams. It has good momentum, so it can pivot out, and that has that slow pivot too with a 67 speed stat. It offers defog, which is really crucial, has really good bulk, has a really good typing. Not a lot of steals can pivot, and not a lot of steals can defog, and not a lot of steals can heal. So the fact that Corviknight can do all three is really, really huge. The only real downside to Corviknight so far in this team design is that Corviknight doesn't have hazard access. So that does put a little more pressure on Mew to maybe be forced to carry some hazards more often if I don't solve that with my remaining picks. But Corviknight fills a lot of roles, especially on the hazard control front, which minimizes my need to make Mew that on any given week because Corviknight is most likely going to come to every match, if not virtually every match this season, just because of the mon it is and the typing it has and the roles it generally provides. So when Corviknight is going to reliably be there, then I don't need to rely on Mew for that role. And so with that in mind, I needed to get some offense and some momentum offense at that because I generally am biased towards having momentum to play with because momentum gives you field control as you can continuously exert pressure, force your opponents into defensive checks, and force them into bad situations where eventually you get the right mon on the field where they can't check it with any one piece unless that piece was already on the field. For example, maybe this Infernape who I picked up, maybe there is something that can handle a flamethrower, but it has to hard switch in to take that flamethrower. It's not going to be a good answer anymore if it's 2-hit KO by the flamethrower, or if it allows Infernape to click Nasty Plot or Swords Dance freely because it's in front of something that can't check it. Maybe it's in front of I'm gonna try to think of an example really quickly, like a Rotom Heat or something like that, something that can't really handle it and it is forced to switch out, or a Ferrothorn, I guess I should say. If I can get a Infernape in front of a Ferrothorn, that's a really free window for Infernape to do any of its setup moves, click any of its attacks pretty freely. Because if there's not a good answer, and if Infernape's the piece on the field, then that's a really free turn to do whatever I want. So I'm generally biased towards momentum mons because I'm just trying to create enough plays in a row where I can get a piece on the field in front of something that can't handle it, and I either get massive damage or I even begin a sweep if it's the right situation. And Infernape generally fits that playstyle well. It offers a really important speed tier at that 108, which is really helpful to have. Really nice ability with Iron Fist. Good priority moves on both the physical and special side with Mach Punch and Vacuum Wave. And then it has that U-turn access. It has Thunder Punch for waters or Grass Knot for special, if it's running a special set for the waters or the grounds as well. So Infernape offers a lot of utility as a mixed attacker, and then it gives me, which I think is really helpful here, access to stealth rocks. I don't expect Infernape to be a reliable stealth rock setter most weeks. I don't expect him to bring it more than maybe 2 or 3 times all season. But the important thing is having a couple of stealth rock options outside of Mew so that Mew isn't obligated to run that. And if I need them in a particular matchup, I have other mons I can lean onto besides Mew so that Mew, again, is not obligated to run those. And so Infernape is an option that can run it. It's not easy studying them because Infernape's defenses are pretty atrocious. I think it's 70 HP, 70 defense, 70 special defense, give or take a few points. So Infernape's not really taking attacks, but if you can find a window to get those stealth rocks up and you have a good situation with them, then that's obviously a really beneficial thing to have. I'm normally not too fond of stealth rocks in this Gen 8 meta. I find them to not be as effective a hazard move as they once were, as most of the pieces that are going to be bothered by the stealth rocks, particularly the flying types, are going to be running boots on a really regularly. So I'm not going to be getting that chip I may want with the stealth rocks. But there are situations where they're really advantageous, especially against teams that don't have good hazard control. So hazard stacking may be something of value. So Infernape offers that alongside really good offensive stats, alongside a really important speed tier, alongside a really good type combination. Just mixes really well with Corviknight because it has a really safe switch out from ground attacks into the Corviknight. It has a really safe switch out from psychic attacks into the Corviknight. It has a really safe switch out from flying attacks into the Corviknight. So they have really nice synergy and they both offer momentum. So I can very easily get a bit of momentum spam going on and then try to create a new situation with Infernape or any of my other pieces that I'll get to. Next up is Rotom Mow. The goal with Rotom Mow here is to offer a secondary strong defog option. Corviknight isn't ever going to have an issue slotting Defog in. It's a really easy move for Corviknight to run. You just don't always want to make Corviknight the only Defog option, because then Corviknight can get prone to being counterplayed a little bit more if they know it's going to be that defog piece. If they know defog, roost, and U-turn are going to always be three of the moves, then you leave your Corviknight prone to being guessed really hard. And there may be matchups where Corviknight has a window to maybe run a Iron Defense set or a bulk up set as like a sweep option. And so it's important to leave those options on the table and available. And so Rotom Mow offers necessary defog, continues to offer momentum, which again I'm very fond of having. And then it offers what this team doesn't yet have, which is a good answer to ground with the grass typing and the immunity as well. So Rotom is able to address some of those in a very helpful way, has access to its own healing through Pain Split, has some things to play with stuff like Trick. So Rotom Mow just has a little bit of versatility that I like to have, has a nice and helpful 86 speed tier, because I'm really, really keen on keeping my speed tiers as good as possible. I'm not overly concerned about stuff below 60. I'm not overly concerned about stuff above 110. But if I can get that 110 to 60 gap really cleanly filled, then I find that to be the most helpful, because that gives me a lot of things to play with, because pieces can be scarred if I need to get faster. Pieces can usually withstand some of the slower things if I need to work around those. But I really want to make sure 110 to 60 is as clean as possible. And so Rotom is offering a really good spot there at that 86 speed tier. And it pairs really nicely, or I mean, I guess it migrates really nicely into Nidoqueen. I had the option for Nidoqueen or Nidoking. I wanted Nidoqueen on this team specifically because Nidoqueen hits a really nice speed tier. Nidoking is 85, Rotom is 86. Just kind of start meshing up speed tiers when I have the option of keeping them more spread out. And I really wanted the bulk Nidoqueen offers on for this team specifically, because the one hazard move I find to be really helpful in Generation 8 is Toxic Spikes. I think they are regularly really effective. It can really minimize your opponent's mobility, because pieces are willing to move around and eat some rocks damage or eat a layer of spikes if it means reasserting field control. There are not a lot of pieces that want to eat the toxic status early and be limited by that for the rest of the game. So if you can get T spikes down and you have a bulky enough mon to set them, it can really minimize an opponent's ability to switch around and move around. And then on a team with a lot of a lot of momentum spam like I do, it forces opponents into a lot of different defensive or offensive checks to try to reassert field control. And so if I am able to lay T spikes, it minimizes their ability to just pivot pieces around to absorb attacks. So I guess we'll think of an example here. So with the Rotom Mow, there are pieces that it couldn't necessarily break. It would struggle to break. We'll say Porygon 2. It's not going to reliably break Porygon 2 just because Porygon 2 has a really good bulk, and it's not going to be able to push through that. Even with a nasty plot set, it's going to struggle to push through that. But if I'm able to lay T spikes down, then Porygon 2 can't just freely switch into Rotom Mow anymore. Rotom Mow can volt switch on the predicted switch in from Porygon 2. Porygon 2 is now eating toxic damage as well as momentum damage. And then I'm able to bring in pieces like Infernape. So I not only status the Porygon, I get some chip, and then I force it right back out again because it can't take an Infernape attack. It's forced out from Infernape. So now it's taken, 25, 30% chip, and I still have field control. And so ways like that, Toxic Spikes can be really effective in minimizing my opponent's ability to maneuver around the field. And the pieces I have so far make it difficult for poison types to come and absorb those toxic spikes, because Nidoqueen has that ground typing, which really makes it difficult for most poison types to come in on Nidoqueen because they don't want to eat the earth powers. The Corviknight gives me immunity from poison alongside the quarter resist from, or the quarter effectiveness from Nidoqueen. And then Mew offers me a really helpful offensive option with, psychic typing, psychic spam, things like that, where poison types again are ill suited to be effective. So I have three really good pieces in my first five that pressure poison types heavily and make it really difficult for most of them to come to matches most weeks. So I have a really good opportunity most weeks to lay toxic spikes if I want to. And then with the momentum I have on my team, I can really enforce opponents into binds early on where either they're forced to have pieces eat attacks they don't want to eat, or they're forced to status pieces they didn't want to status to absorb those attacks. So it can put opponents in lose-lose situations, which I like. And then, really, really importantly, Nidoqueen offers me a third option for Stealth Rocks, and probably one of my better setters if I want it to be, just because I don't want to have to make me do that too much, and I don't generally expect Fernape to be able to slot that in most weeks. But Nidoqueen has that as an option to work with, and so I can lay them if I like the situation. But again, I find Toxic Spikes to be generally the more effective hazard week to week, just because of its ability to limit mobility from the opponent. And so I really just wanted a good bulky option there. That's what Nidoqueen offers. Umbreon is on this team as a cleric role, just because Umbreon does that job really well. It takes pressure off of Mew to carry Heal Bell. It offers really necessary wish support, which is big for Corviknight, Nidoqueen, and Rotom Mow, because Rotom Mow does have that pain split access, but it doesn't always want to run that week to week, and it may not be able to slot that in. Umbreon, with its 95 HP stat, can really give Rotom and its 50 HP stat a lot of health back on every wish. So it's just a really good pairing just to make the most of Rotom's general bulk but lack of HP. The Wish support is really helpful there. And then the Cleric role with Heal Bell is really nice as well. And then Umbreon offers Baton Pass as a slow momentum option, which again is really helpful here, just to maybe come in on a psychic attack or a ghost attack or a dark attack and force that mon out. So maybe it comes in to check something like Spectrier. Spectrier can't stay in on that attack. Spectrier is going to be forced out the next turn because it can't eat any attack Umbreon's throwing, and it can't break Umbreon. So I can pretty freely click Baton Pass on the force switch out and then put another piece in front of whatever they just brought in to continue to maintain field control. So I like that, despite it being otherwise a pretty stagnant fat wall, it does have that Baton Pass option, which I have run in the past on Umbreons. So I expect Umbreon to do that in this league to some degree as well and be effective in that role. So it's offering some general wish support, but also some needed cleric support without sacrificing mobility on this team, which I think is crucial. Next up is Mega Altaria. This is not a mon that gets drafted in a lot of leagues. It can be finicky to use because you don't start any game with the dragon typing or with the fairy typing. So if you need to get the fairy typing out, you need to mega evolve early. You don't want to lead it that much because it doesn't really lead off against a lot of pieces well, just because it doesn't have the breaking power to be horrifying up front. It doesn't have the move pool coverage to necessarily decimate a counter lead. And so it can have a tough time leading. But once you get the fairy type activated, once you mega evolve it, Mega Altaria is generally a really good mon. In my opinion, it has a good stat line. It has a really strong access to mixed coverage. It's got 110s for both special attack and attack, which really is a theme on this team because my Mega Altaria, my Nidoqueen, my Infernape, and my Mew can all run mix sets every week whenever they want. None of them are necessarily busted with their stat lines, but it makes it really difficult to switch into their attacks until you know whether it's a physical or a special. Because if you send maybe a Gastrodon in on an Infernape, Infernape clicks Nasty Plot, it's gonna OHKO that Gastrodon with Grass Knot on the next turn, unless the Gastrodon retreats and doesn't take that grass knot, or it's running, a grass berry to eat the attack, it is able to kind of just shut down Gastrodon right away. So having all those mixed attackers is really helpful here. Since I don't necessarily have a lot of breaking power, I'd still put opponents in a bind where they have to consider both the special and the physical options for all of these mons and determine what's going to be the safest switch in, if any at all, to what attack might come out from them. And if they guess wrong, so maybe they expect a physical Altaria for some reason, and they bring out Skarmory on Altaria to manage the physical attacks because I'm not going to break it with Earthquake, I'm not going to break it with Body Slam, but then I smack it with Flamethrower instead. Skarmory's not doing all that much. So it can make it difficult for overly biased defensive pieces. So, they have something like Skarmory, which is really physically defensive, something like Blissey, which is really specially defensive. Mega Altaria, Infernape, Nidoqueen, Mew can all be really painful for those mons to deal with because it can just skirt right around their better defensive stat and go right for the other one. And Mega Altaria has a lot it can do in this team, which I like. It has wish support. Don't really expect to use it, but it's there. That 75 HP stat isn't that great. It has roost access, so I don't need to run wish, but it has it in case I need wish support for a week and Umbreon can't come. It has heal bell, which again is nice in case Umbreon can't come and I need it as an option to maybe deal with some toxic spam if I expect that to be problematic. It has defog, which is really nice. I don't intend to use that much, but I probably will show up once or twice in case I need Corviknight to do something more offensive one week, or Rotom can't come, or I really don't want to have to run it on Mew. I can still slot it onto the Mega Altaria. So Mega Altaria can still do a lot of cleric roles and support roles if I need it to, but it also has really strong Dragon Dance sets. It can do a lot of special damage with the Hyper Voice Flamethrower combination that's really hard to switch into. Not a lot of mons are going to resist those two moves. And then it has access to getting it has some techie access too. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off, but it's something I'm eyeing. It has Fire Spin Perish Song as a combination it could run in the right situation. So you trap something with Fire Spin, click Perish Song, and you're doing massive amounts of damage. It has some fun stuff with like Cotton Guard it can play with, so it could run like a really stally Cotton Guard, Toxic, Roost, Heal Bell set maybe one week where it's just spamming status because the opponent doesn't have good steel or poison options, and so it's really free to click toxic. So Altaria has some flexibility with its move pool, more so than I thought when I first looked at them a while back. And so I think it slots in really well here, where it's able to kind of do a lot of different things depending on what I need it to do in any one match. And this team isn't really built on raw breaking power. It's built on just having the right pieces for the right matchup and making the most out of it. And so Altaria fits that design pretty well. And then the team offers a lot of necessary mobility so that Mega Altaria can get onto the field. I mean, it does have a lot of good resists. It only has three weaknesses: poison, steel, and fairy, which are all notably resisted or immune by Corviknight. So Corviknight is a very, very safe switch out for Mega Altaria when it's being pressured by those kind of attacks. And then Corviknight can slow momentum right back into Mega Altaria or slow momentum back into something else if I need it to. So it offers really good synergy alongside the Mega Altaria. So the Mega Altaria has that flea option. And then among all the pieces so far, the Mew, the Corviknight, the Infernape, the Rotom-Mow, and the Umbreon all offer momentum moves that can get Mega Altaria onto the field. So it has a lot of opportunities to get entry and not have to be forced to hard switch in. It has some helpful immunities, obviously, with the Dragon or the Ground if it hasn't Mega evolved yet. And then it helps manage a lot of momentum spam because it resists U-turn, Volt Switch, and Flip Turn. So it's a really safe switch in option if I'm having to deal with too much momentum and I need to take minimum damage. So all those things I think make Mega Altaria really good. And I think Mega Altaria is in a good position to shine here, just because it's not overly bothered by any one thing. Oh, it does have an ice weakness, which is somewhat concerning with the pieces I have so far, as only Infernape is able to resist ice, and that isn't necessarily a strong resist. Umbreon, Corviknight, and Mew aren't really going to be broken by ice attacks all that much unless it's a specs or a band set. So I'm not too worried about the ice spam. And my next piece really is the ice check, which is the Pyukumuku, who is a staple for many of my teams. I'm quite content running him as my only water in most leagues. I am wary of the fact that this team doesn't have great access to water outside of Mew, so it could be a concern where I'm a little short on water attacks for the right matchups. But I'm quite content with Pyukumuku as my mono water. I've run him as mono water multiple times. I've run him alongside some really offensive water pieces like Greninja in the past. I didn't opt for that in this league, but he does it one job and he does it really well. He just kind of shuts down setup sweeps. He shuts down physical or offensive threats so that if they can't two-hit KO Pyukumuku, they can't do anything. He's obviously going to be prone to things like taunt, things like substitute, things like toxic. So a lot of that is just navigating and knowing what Amana is going to be doing in any particular matchup and knowing what it's well suited to check. Things like Mega Lopunny really hate Pyukumuku. Things like Mega Glade can't actually 2-hit KO Pyukumuku if it's running like a Jolly set. Mamoswine with a Life Orb and an Adamant Nature maxes out at 49.5% or something like that with the damage output on Earthquake. So it's really able to sit in on a lot of attacks and just pressure them off the field because they don't want to take the counter. They maybe have a Life Orb. They're maybe activating the Rocky Helmet if it's running that in a particular matchup. The thing with Pyukumuku is it just doesn't want to sit the field too long. which is great because he has baton pass access, so he has momentum to work with, and it's really, really slow momentum at that. The only thing going after Pyukumuku in terms of momentum moves is going to be teleports, which are primarily on the Slowbro, Slowking, and then the Clefable. So he's really able to pivot out slowly. So he can come in, eat an attack he resists, like an ice attack or a water attack, force that mon out. And then as that mon's being forced out, it can pretty safely click baton pass and then get the next piece in and continue back on offense. So he does a good job in that role. I've had a lot of success with him in various leagues. I'm hoping that trend continues in this match or in this league, but we will see. I am very wary of the fact that he is well known to many members in this league, and so that generally is a problem. It does minimize the potency of Pyukumuku because it's no longer a 4-point mon that gets discounted in prep. He's now a 4-point mon people really strongly consider when they're prepping, and so that can lead to him being shut down. But it really is all about how I try to use him in particular matchups. And as long as I'm not overly reliant on him or I'm leaving him on the field too long, he generally does a good job in his role. And so I'm going to try to make the most of that in this league as well. Next up is Chinchino. So as I mentioned earlier, speed is not necessarily my friend on this team right now. I'm not overly worried about that. Infernape has no problem running Scarf. Rotom Mo has the ability to run Scarf. Uh, Mew can get fast in a hurry with Dragon Dance. Nidoqueen in the right matchup can be Scarf. Mega Altaria has Dragon Dance, so it can really get fast in a hurry. And Altaria after a Dragon Dance will go faster than, Zeraora or Dragapult if I EV it right. So I can get faster than pretty much anything I need to get faster than without too much complications. But it's good to have a decently fast, 115 speed tier. The 115 speed tier is really, really helpful. There are a lot of things, especially towards the top of the tiering, that don't like that 115 speed stat. So things like Latios hate that 115, especially on a Chinchino, because Chinchino with triple axle and a band can pretty solidly one hit KO those mons with triple axle. The Gallade doesn't like it as well. I don't necessarily one hit KO Gallade, but if it's 1v1 versus a chipped Gallade late game, then I can KO it with tail slap. Mega Diancie at that 110 doesn't like the bullet seed spam because bullet seed can pretty reliably one hit KO it as well. And so there's a lot of other things as well. Keldeo, Terrakion, Cobalion. There's a lot of things that are sitting at that 108, 109 range that also don't want to deal with Chinchino. Things like Alvantula, also at that 108, who generally rely on Focus Sash to set webs on turn one, don't want to deal with the, the skill link spam from Chinchino. So it has a lot of uh, ability to offer a respectable speed tier, especially at a low cost, you know, output where I think I only spent 6 points on Chinchino. It is doing enough where it can really hinder plans if I need to bring it to certain matchups, and it can really help deal with some of those really scary top tier mons just because of the speed tier it's naturally at that 115. And with a band, it's usually pretty effective at one hit KOing or more or less breaking some of those pieces. And then again, because I don't want to stress speed too much and I have good options for it, another good piece on this team and one I'm really experimenting with and the one that's probably going to get the most flack for being on any team is the Galarian Darmanitan. Generally, he is the most expensive piece that never gets drafted. Usually he sits in the 15 or 16 point range. The issues with Galarian and Domanitan, among the several options, are Mono Ice isn't particularly that great of a typing when you only have a certain number of points to work with, and having to spend all of those points on a Mono Ice is tough. Usually it's fine with something like Kyurem, which offers that dragon typing as well, so it's not too concerning because you get a really good dragon as well with that ice typing, or Weavile, who offers a really good dark type and a really good speed stat at 125. But Darmanitan doesn't offer those. He only offers mono ice. Or if you're really getting particular in a match and you want to run Zen mode, you can get the ice fire. But again, that's not reliable secondary typing you're going to get access to. So he's a really expensive mono ice. He has he's almost always going to be choice locked just because if you're not running Zen mode, you might as well choice lock Darmanitan because of what Guerrilla Tactics does, where it's essentially operating as a band. And really, most of the time, Darmanitan is going to be carrying a choice scarf because you essentially get a choice scarf, choice band combo, or like a free dragon dance to work with. And so he's going to be almost somewhat predictable going week to week into matches. And then the thing that makes him sometimes struggle is that he has problems hitting the field because he doesn't have bulk. He has a good HP stat, but he has like 55s in his defense and special defense, so he can't take hits. Ice only resists ice, so he's at best usually taking neutral hits from anything he switches in on. And it doesn't always have the right breaking moves it needs to have for a certain matchup. Although Icicle Crash, Flare Blitz, Earthquake, and U-Turn are going to be generally very effective in a lot of matchups. There are situations where bulky waters can really hinder him and pressure him with like rocky helmets so that he struggles to just pivot out. He can't U-turn freely because he's dealing with rocky helmets as well. All of those things can normally make Darmanitan a problematic piece to add to any team, but I think my team addresses a lot of the issues Darmanitan runs into in a lot of matchups. So he doesn't like Stealth Rocks being on the field. Those are always going to be a problem for Darmanitan. I have two really good defog options in on Corviknight and Rotom Mo to keep those off the field, as well as two secondary options with Mew and Mega Altaria if I need to have extra defog or if I need someone else to be a defogger in a match. I have four solid pieces that can defog without too much issue. As I've mentioned, my team is really, really momentum heavy, which is crucial for Darmanitan. So it gives him a lot of windows to hit the field safely, which is huge. If Darmanitan, every time Darmanitan hits the field, he's a problem for someone to check because ice types can only ice types mono waters or bulky waters can only check him for so long, especially if they don't have good healing access, or if I'm able to do something like I said earlier with Nidoqueen and getting the T spikes down. If I'm able to do stuff like that, then Darmanitan starts breaking through games because the checks or counters for him start to wear down. So my team offers really good momentum to get him onto the field safely. To rehash, Mew can flip turn, U-turn, volt switch. I think he can teleport as well. So four different ways of moving around the field, probably baton pass. So five different ways of mobility. Corviknight has U-turn access. Infernape has U-turn access. Uh, Rotom Mo has volt switch access. Umbreon can baton pass. Pyukumuku can baton pass. Chinchino can U-turn. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pieces that can offer needed mobility for Darmanitan to hit the field safely. And Darmanitan hitting the field safely, especially if I'm running a band that week, is going to be absolutely huge because nothing is going to be switching in happily on Banded Icicle Crash from a Galarian Darmanitan running guerrilla tactics. That's just not something people can take long term. And so my team really offers him those needed opportunities to hit the field and be a menace. And I'm really hoping to make the most of that. I don't have a lot of Galarian Darmanitan, you know, game like experience in terms of seeing him in action in draft. I really have not seen him come off the board very much. And I think the misconception with Darmanitan is when he does come off the board, it's almost always by a coach that isn't familiar with the draft format. The thing that Darmanitan is known for was being an absolute menace in OU. So people see him in draft and think he's going to be equally as effective and equally as problematic, but people can counter prep for him better in a draft format when they know he's coming. And so he doesn't end up being as effective on some of those teams by coaches that maybe don't have a lot of draft experience behind them. And so he underperforms and so he looks bad. And Darmanitan certainly is not an easy mon to use, but if you can get him on the field safely, or you can create situations for him to be effective, or you can keep the field clean in general so that he can revenge kill reliably without having to eat 25% chip for hitting the field, then Darmanitan turns into a real menace quite quickly. And I think I have the right pieces to make the most out of him. Again, I don't know. I haven't seen him used very much. I certainly haven't seen him used effectively. So my goal here is to see if my combination of momentum and hazard control can maximize his potency. And my hope is that will be the case. Finally, Swirlix is on the team. I don't find myself too worried about speed stats because again, Darmanitan can scarf easily, Infernape can scarf easily, Rotom can scarf fairly easily, Nidoqueen can in the right matchups, Mew can get faster in a hurry, Mega Altaria can get faster in a hurry. So I have a lot of ways to get my speed stats higher than they look if I need them to get higher than they look. Infernape has also good access to priority with Mach Punch and Vacuum Wave. So I have ways of dealing with Mons without having to worry too much about that. Nidoqueen even has Sucker Punch to work with too, for that matter. So again, I have options for speed, and it doesn't make me too worried. But if the situation calls for it, Swirlix is there to offer that 1 point web support. Swirlix can do some cheeky things just given its unburdened ability. So I can run something like Sash and Sticky Web, and then click Endeavor as I'm about to die, and that way I get them onto 1 HP with webs on the field, and then I go hyper offense from there. So it has some options and some utility. I'm not really expecting it to come to maybe more than one game, but it offers a web option. If I'm able to force it early season, it turns into a respectable web option because now opponents have to consider the chance that I might bring it. And which is usually my goal with some of these 1 or 2 point mods is to force them into a game early season if I can. And if I'm able to force them in early season, it forces opponents to respect and maybe even counter prep for them a little bit, which is all you really want out of a 1 point or 2 point mod sometimes is to impact opponents' prep enough to the point that they can't singularly address any one thing as well anymore. So if I'm forcing something to carry, rapid spin or defog when maybe they didn't care about toxic spikes or stealth rocks, but they really are impacted by sticky webs, then that's a win. That's forcing my opponent to waste a slot on a move that they probably won't need anyway, but I made them carry because they're concerned that Swirlix would ruin their game, and Swirlix, maybe came early and proved its potency. So that's what I'm hoping to get out of Swirlix. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I'm not overly bothered if it doesn't take off. It's an extra fairy option, which I guess is something in case I run into a weird matchup where like maybe I'm dealing with Regidrago and I'm concerned about Mega Alteria's ability to lead off and Mega Evolve right away. Then I have Swirlix as like a peculiar check to a Regidrago. Not really expecting that to be its role, but it's something that exists. Overall, that's my team. As you can see, my 115 to 65 speed tiers are really, really solid. There's never a gap larger than I think 9 all the way down. So yeah, 115 to 108. So 7, 8, 5, 9, 6, 4, 9. Or I'm sorry, that one's 9 again, and then 2, and then it drops off a little bit from there. But below 65, it's not usually as relevant. There's only a couple of things down there. And if they still are forced to try to outspeed Corviknight, then it's mission accomplished anyway. So I really hit the speed tiers I want there. I don't have any weird gaps. I don't have any unnecessary doubling up. Hitting that 100 stat is really, really nice. I find in draft format, it really makes it hard for offensive pieces at 100 to not also run max speed because Mew is something you generally have to respect enough as a max speed option that it can force something like Galarian Zapdos to run that when maybe it didn't want to have to run all of its speed EVs and it want to do get some bulk. It can take that potential away, and then having something just below and just above 100 is really nice as well, so that I hit some nice speed ties, or I just outcreep a couple of things if I want to. So really happy with my speed tiers overall. I'm not overly worried about my max being 115. I've won 2 leagues with Greninja as my fastest piece at 122, so I'm not too worried about that. And Greninja didn't really come all that much either, just because I had Rotom Wash in one of those leagues, and Rotom Wash just like to come to more matches as my water piece. So I'm not too bothered where I sit at 115, and then I'm really content with my speed tiers. I think my team is organized really well to allow Mew to shine in whatever role I want Mew to shine in. There's not one thing my team does so badly that I need Mew to do it for me most weeks. Mew can just do absolutely whatever I want it to do. I have a lot of mixed attacker options, which is really crucial for me so that I don't feel like so that my lack of wall breaking isn't too problematic because I don't think a lot of pieces get that strong in their attack stats. I think my highest special attack stat is probably 110 by the Mega Altaria, which normally could be concerning, but I have so many good mixed attackers that it's not going to be too bothersome, I think. And then I have a really strong physical breaker with the Darmanitan, and I think he is set up to be really effective in this league, and I'm hoping he really does take off. But time will tell. It's early season. Go into week 1 next week. Try to get a strong start. It's probably going to take me a bit to get accustomed to the Mew because it's my first time using it, and it's a very peculiar mon. But once I think I settle into that groove, I think the team will continue to synergize well, and I have, in my opinion, the right pieces to make the most out of it. Don't feel like I need a secondary water. Don't feel like I need extra speed. Don't feel like I need to drop Darmanitan because I think he is going to be effective in this league. It's just about making the most out of him. So that is the very first team under the new team name, which is the Potown Pyukumukus after my boy Pyukumuku. Really excited to have it make its debut season. And I'm really hoping that the team operates to the effectiveness I am anticipating. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. I'll review it afterwards and see what went wrong, or hopefully get a better sense on how to get the most out of Galarian Darmanitan in future draft formats. But only one way to find out. So thank you for tuning in. I know this was an overly long analysis, but the goal here was to really kind of dive into my team and explain what I'm trying to do with it and what I'm hoping to make out of it. And I think I am content with what's going to happen, but we'll see. So stay tuned.